I would like to welcome all the participants of our 101 All-in-One Festival. And we are now starting our third section, which is called Telehaptics. So we'll be talking with the artists, engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs. And the first speaker is Ken Ronaldo. Professor Ronaldo, I give the floor to you. So you can share the screen now.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much. Parasite. A virtual experience isn't a collection of affective technologies, but it is a social relation among humans' neural systems of cognition, integrating with and mediated by machine amplifiers of that experience. It is not neutral, and it does have an agenda. Symbiont. Our cells are not our own. They are symbionts. They have been occupied by others. The mitochondria have pierced the membrane. They exist inside each cell, comfortably with other organelles, now in a perfect symbiotic synchrony. There was a time when they were parasites as they moved into the cell through the membrane in the process of symbiogenesis. Now we are not individual, though we imagine we are. We are a neural construction that imagines we are individual, and behaviorally and actually, we are a mediation of all the myriad desires of trillions of human cells working, communicating with trillions of bacterial and fungal cells. And now, what of the agency of the algorithm, adding its mechanistic desires to this neural perceptual space and noise? Where does cognition exist? Is it the cell, the brain, the stomach? Is it the telepresent machine? Telepresent implies cognition and perhaps action at a distance. Is it the distance between the mitochondria and the cell wall? The speed of the propagation of the neural system? Is it the distance between the bacterially mediated stomach and the brain via the vagus nerve? Is it the distance between New York and St. Petersburg using neural and ocular extensions? I believe I am conscious, though so are all the others that constitute my collective being of knowing and acting at a distance. Yet really, what do we know of reality? What is reality? What can be trusted? We know from experiments by neurologist Vielnura Ramachandran with his mirror box and phantom limbs, we know we can create the illusion of touch and feeling by playing with mirrors. So when the scientist touches a phony arm with a paintbrush, it allows us to imagine physical touch. That is, for me, the most telling thing about cognition, and also refers to the possible dangers of knowing or unknowing at a distance. As we now know, it is a construction, a best guess of reality using the cross conformation of many of our neural systems. The focus of my work has been to reveal the underlying nature of other living species, both biological and algorithmic, by showing and allowing the viewer to experience them in some way, direct and corporeal way, and also at a distance. Scatter Surge is about genetic evolution and all genes evolving in real time. The work is about making that visible to the viewer by capturing and growing their holobiomes.
We may think of the self as an individual. In reality, we are a multi-species community made from trillions of human cells, symbiotically intertwined with trillions of bacterial, fungal, and viral microbes. All of these have a common ancestor. We, along with other species, water, light, earth, air, and atmosphere, come to form a holobiont, a complex and dynamic ecosystem composed of hologenomes, us, and other associated genomes interacting and co-evolving constantly. The Scatter Surge Art and Science installation celebrates our symbiotic connections to microbial life living in and on us, the material nature of that life, and the new forms of algorithmic life. When you enter the installation, infrared-triggered microprocessors switch on whisper fans to propel the mobiles forward and collect your skin microbiota. The mobiles, constructed with branches and stones, support the rocks and microbe collection units. Growing on the branches is lichen, itself a fungus symbiotically joined with algae, as researched by Dr. Lynn Margulis. As they spin, fans suck your human skin microflora through a paper filter placed on plexiglass masks, cut in the shape of pluripotent stem cells. These skin cells can be turned into embryonic stem cells and then turned into any other cell type, such as heart, lung, brain, or eye. Microbe samples collected on the paper filter during the run of the installation are grown in liquid agar as holobiome snapshots. They reveal varieties of symbiotic bacteria and fungi living with participants who enter and interact with the works. Although Staphylococcus and Corynebacterium are common, there are about 1,000 species known to live on our skin. The installation celebrates and draws attention to the fact that human, bacterial, and fungal cells are descendants of early bacteria. This work asks further questions about the relationship between microbes that reside in and on us, cellular tuning and health, and their evolution and connection to our material planet. Stones are a prominent element in this installation, serving as counterweights to the mobiles and the hanging rocks referencing gravity, the formation of planets, and the mineral and material substrates involved in the origins of early life. The essential amino acids of our bodies have their origins in the elements of these same rocks and stones. The unique properties of rocks that allowed life to emerge have now been exploited by humans with technological advances, as silica has become silicon. While humans benefit as hosts to all those acquired genes of those who came before and are symbiotically intertwined with us now, silicon and algorithm present new possibilities for obtaining and manipulating memes, and a more integrated human, machine, fungal, and bacterial hybrid is emerging. CRISPR-Cas9, the trick where bacteria use genetic scissors to snip DNA, has been discovered by humans. These accurate DNA scissors unify with silicon-based bioinformatics and allow us, by design, to rejoin and further integrate all the beneficial DNA and genomes of our microbial forebears.
The interconsciousness is another work that basically gets at the issues of action and feeling at a distance. This is a work basically that allows you to receive a very comfortable massage and makes real at a distance the intelligence of bacteria which exist inside all of our stomachs. If the bacteria in the stomach is happy and healthy, then basically it allows you to receive a comforting massage from an extension of that bacteria, which is a very large robotic tongue. This is the glass stomach that actually holds that bacteria with a cooling peristaltic pump.
The enteric consciousness is a large robotic tongue controlled by an artificial stomach. This artificial stomach is filled with the same living bacteria, Lactobacillus acidophilus, that occupy our own natural stomachs. Our stomachs and intestinal systems are called the enteric nervous system and are certainly seen as forms of intelligence as they possess 1,000th of the numbers of neurons in the human brain and use many of the same neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, and epinephrine. If the hand and finger can be seen as extensions of our human brain, then the tongue can be thought of as an extension of the enteric nervous system, seeking out what it prefers to ingest. In this installation, an artificial stomach will allow the bacteria within it to activate a functioning robotic chair in the shape of a giant tongue. This giant tongue is designed to give you a comforting massage. The robotic chair is covered with a red emu leather that gives the appearance of swollen taste buds of an enlarged and hungry tongue. I have chosen in this work to focus on our sense of touch and corporeal experience as a way to explore interactivity, as our largest sense organ is in fact our skin. As peristaltic muscle movements propel food and bacteria through our natural stomachs, so an electronic peristaltic pump will artificially replicate these movements as it moves cooling water through the artificial glass stomach. A pH meter will constantly measure the acidity and basicity of the bacteria, and these signals are interfaced to and activate a series of relays and microcontrollers that allow the robotic tongue chair to activate, relax, and massage the viewer interactive. Acid-loving milk bacterium, Lactobacillus acidophilus, are the activators of this robotic tongue. Another important element of this installation are two smaller robotic tongues that dip into and out of chocolate pools located in large glass containers.
That's certainly a tongue that I can relate to, one that dips in and out of robotic pools of sugar. Another work that I think really gets at the issue of telepresence and our desire to see self through the lens and through the lens of the camera in particular, to give ourselves a sense of existing, is the paparazzi bots.
Paparazzi bots are a series of 5 autonomous robots, each standing at the height of the average human. Comprised of multiple cameras, sensors, and robotic actuators on a custom-built rolling platform, they move at the speed of a walking human, avoiding walls and obstacles while using infrared sensors to move toward humans. They have ultrasonic sensors allowing them to see out to a distance of 13 feet in order to move toward passing subjects. The paparazzi robots seek one thing, which is to capture photos of people and to make these images available to the press and the World Wide Web as a statement of culture's obsession with the celebrity image, and especially our own images. Each autonomous robot makes the decision to take the photos of particular people while ignoring other humans in the exhibition, based on such things as whether or not the viewers are smiling or the shape of their smile.
So this is also action at a distance. And one of my favorite things, of course, about this is that not only do I get to watch the agency of the machines, I get to sometimes find wonderful photographs after the fact. This is one of my favorite from world-renowned artist Stellar, also captured by the paparazzi bots. So I wasn't at the show, but I feel like I was virtually there, because in collecting the camera and finding these precious shots, I feel I was able to capture some really extraordinary international artists. Another work that really gets at the sense of action at a distance, and one that gives, in fact, the power of distance to a series of fish, the power of controlling a robot, is the augmented fish reality, which allowed you to see the organization of the fish and their interactions. It asks you to understand their agency and desires, and by empowering them, I am wanting you to imagine and psycho-project yourself through their fish robots so that you could, in a sense, be immersed in the tank with them.
5 rolling robotic fishbowl sculptures designed to explore interspecies and transspecies communication. These sculptures allow the Siamese fighting fish to use intelligent hardware and software to move their robotic bowls under their control. As with many fish, Siamese fighting fish have eyes which allow them to see for great distances outside the water. Fish have the ability to mentally map their environments in finding food and avoiding predators. This design uses 4 infrared sensors around each bowl, which allow the fish to move forward and back and turn the bowls. By swimming to the edge of the bowl, the fish activate motorized wheels that move the robots in that direction.
This is the maximum speed of the fish robots. giving them
Humans
action
interact
at a
with the work
distance.
simply by entering the environment. These bowls consist of a living environment of peace lilies which help to absorb the waste stream from the fish. The bowls and robots are designed to allow the fish to get within 1/4 inch of each other for visual communication between the fish, both male and female.
The last work I'd like to talk about is called fusiform polyphony. And it's a work that allows you to experience the mind of the robotic system through sound and interaction and through music. These robots take the multicultural makeup of any city and have the unique look of each person create a different soundscape, each face song joining with other facial soundscapes creates an overall sonic human robot experience. These elements fused manifest the viewer both as participant and actor, contributor, and conductor in defining new ways of interacting with robots and creating a unique sonic and live action robotics video environment. This is me in my studio building these robots with carbon fiber rods, presumably because at Nuit Blanche in Toronto, people get pretty rowdy. This is some code showing you what the robot sees and then breaking my face down into a series of cubes, which then activate a series of songs and pre-recorded pieces of music. This is what the work looks like installed in Nuit Blanche. And this is what the work looks like on opening night. Perhaps the largest opening of my life. This is what the work sounds like. So this is an auto-composed work, and it makes the mind of the system available to the viewer. It makes the wisdom of the system available to the viewer. This is another song that was composed and becomes revealed by the system itself, also fully composed by the robots. This will be the last song I play before I conclude my talk. VR. As we pierce the membrane of the machine and it pierces our psyche and we enter the embryonic sac of chips and wire that is VR and Zoom, and to know at a distance, will we understand the dangers of VR? Will we feel phantom limbs? Will they be limbs of kindness and empathy, or will they be guns? When a company or entity is focused on selling products, will that design and product allow true seeing outside market demands to always consume? As commerce controls the machine and channel, and we are further locked in a visual and auditory bubble, will we understand and can we control this new hungry agency of VR as it pierces the membrane of our psyche? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Do we have questions, maybe, for the speaker? If no, I have. Number one is, yeah, you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. So my question was about the paparazzi bots. What about the privacy issue? Because the people can't actually they can't influence. They can't say delete this photo, please, and professors tell it
I object. I object to that photograph, and I want it photoshopped.
Amy and I will work on it, Stella, but you're as handsome as they come. Yeah, actually, I mean, you bring up a very good case there. And, you know, in today's public, really, we almost have to assume that we're being photographed. In a way, by putting the camera in the face of the viewer, it sort of announces, yes, the machine is there to manipulate you. And indeed, these robots won't even take your photograph unless you smile. But oftentimes when I show these works, I'm required by some of these exhibitions to actually have release forms that are signed by each person. When I, for example, though, retrieved this robot from a very large exhibition in Switzerland, I'd actually found that some of people actually went in to delete photos, presumably because maybe they were there with somebody that wasn't their wife, for example. I'd also managed in other exhibitions to collect the robots, and I found images of the future mayor of one city picking his nose and looking down the shirt of a woman. So in a way, the paparazzi robots really have captured some of the most, what I call salacious, delicious moments potentially available to a human witnessing and experiencing something at a distance. And of course, I think it's also important to recognize Dmitry Bulatov in this talk, because Dmitry Bulatov is one of my favorite humans and curators on the planet. And he was the original curator that commissioned these works for a show in Moscow.
And I have to say too that we often sort of interrogate the human, what it means to be human, how does a body operate and so on. But I think what Ken's robots do is interrogate what a robot can be, how a robot can interact. So these novel kind of hybrid eco-robots really present a very different and a much kind of friendlier interface to robotics that we normally are confronted with.
Thank you very much, Stellar. Yes, I would say that for me, one of the primary things I'm concerned with is empathy. Empathy in the channel of the machine, empathy looking to others, the sensitivity and the beauty of fish, but even empathy for our microbiomes. I'm worried right now in this COVID moment that every time we wash our hands with some nasty alcohol, we're killing all these beautiful, healthy bacteria that actually keep the unhealthy bacteria at bay. So, you know, the channel, the algorithm, the information of the commercial systems that are always pushing new product to solve some problem are often false. They're a kind of phantom limb themselves. They're telling us something that isn't true or isn't there or shouldn't be there.
I have to clarify, though, Ken, that although I have empathy for your robots, I'm not so sure I have empathy for you personally.
Oh. Thank you, Stellar. I'm about to bring up a big picture of me putting my tongue in your ear.
That was the extra ear or the?
It was the extra ear, but I have your other ear too, Stellar.
Okay.
We can't hear you, Natalia.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, yes, please.
Thanks for your presentation, and I saw a lot of examples where the nature and some biological forms interact with autonomous systems and robots, and it will raise the really complex questions. And the one of the first, for example, we already touched it when the autonomous insulin pumps just placed inside the human's body and fully autonomous act. And when you, for example, refreshing software of this pump, it makes the really big legal collision. Because nobody wants to touch it, because, oh, please, you did, please be fully like independent in the legal sense.
Yes.
All the damages or all risks you will be fully by yourself.
Yeah,
but there is the next step in this idea that soon we will see the chips with what will be work with our memories, with our I don't know, consciousness maybe, and then to make it more powerful. And this is a question: will it be like a separate consciousness from the human consciousness, the consciousness on the chip and the consciousness on the body? Is it different things or the same, or should be separate or not?
Yeah, I think that this is a really great question, Alexander, and I like the question because and it really gets to the issue of why I said that virtual reality and Zoom is not a neutral space. It's often a space mediated by commercial needs. I find this to be a fearful moment in some respects. We're learning about and hearing about things like contact lenses with microchips in them. Will the implant of those microchips and contact lenses now always have a little Facebook symbol on the left-hand side? Is that the way we'll be able to afford them? Will we be able to stop the algorithm? Because the algorithm is, in a way, a representation of the commercial system. And it's a hungry thing. It constantly is pinging us with, oh, I want this, or it's the red heart symbol on Facebook, or it's the algorithm of Zoom or eBay telling me I bought something. Thank you, I know I bought something. So to me, these are really important issues that we need to separate in order to separate the commercial side of things from what in fact allows us to really connect as a human species to each other. Patrick, please.
Okay, I'll try to talk slowly because of the bandwidth issue. And as I was saying, is like we talk about the algorithm like it's this single thing. It's like the algorithm, as if, but the thing is that I see it as sort of like a Deleuzian regime of control that's made up of series of systems. And the problem, and the problem is that, it's almost like the Borg from Star Trek. There's this set of systems that's coming at us from all directions, from different sources. And the issue is that, except for trying to jam it or trying to do our own, individual systems of resistance, how can we get around these regimes of control?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I completely agree with you. When I refer to the algorithm, I'm not, of course, referring it to as a single entity, but as a multiplicity of many different desires of many different corporate entities and even arts entities, all sort of pinging us with their desires. But I really feel that it gets down to an issue of we, as a group of artisans, especially, we perhaps have more access and control to what these algorithms can be. And it has to do with designing systems, at least in my case, that I hope are empathetic to other living things, as opposed to algorithms which are designed to shoot something, for example, or amplify something that I think.
Yeah. If we look at things in terms of like, systems-based approaches, in other words, basically organizing one system, to deal with another system, effectively. And, but the one thing is I think this is the problem. Well, I think this is the challenge that we have right now, is that the matter of is that we see these amorphous things. And the issue is the matter of how we can kind of create a meta discourse that allows one meta system to confront another meta system And I think this is the thing that we're confronted with, especially with things like learning system, like machine learning, especially. And that's one thing I'm getting at right now.
Yeah. Well, I also think that the, in a way that the structure of the way systems began to be created, when you think about the nature of the mouse itself, it was a pointer system, which was the direct result of the hand moving on a mouse, giving you a pointer in the thing. But of course, in a sense, that also allows gaming systems to imagine, well, what instead of the mouse? Oh, it could be a gun. So in a way, it's almost like the algorithms themselves have almost been pre-optimized to think of things as targets. And that's a kind of weird ripple in the pond of the technology. The targeting of something itself is almost, it's kind of a vestige of the nature of the software or the system. And I think as artisans, we need to battle that. We need to battle, or we need to change that in some way. I don't want to kill two birds with one stone. I would prefer to feed two birds with one seed.
Okay, so I guess we could proceed to this discussion further on with our next speaker, who is Alexander Kapitonov. Alexander, so he's the Dean of the Faculty of Info Communications and Associate Professor at the Faculty of Control Systems and Robotics at Itmo University. So Alexander, please.
Yeah, should I start to share the screen? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, just let me... Is it okay?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Dear colleagues, my speech will be about my sphere. It's mainly related with robotics and communication. Because in my vision, one of the next step of rising technologies, it will be a fully autonomous systems, like separate agents, like the separate companies that will interact with each other. And the simple example, I think that's the first thing what we will see in the nearest future, when the autonomous truck, because we have Tesla autonomous trucks, it's already on the road. And we have autonomous warehouses, for example, from Amazon, where the goods storage. And when we have the two different companies that should interact with each other, autonomous truck should take the goods from autonomous warehouse. Here we should make the communication between different companies, and we should deliver the contract between those companies. And only robots acts in this process. It's a very weird thing, and I will show you the separate some small cases where we implement this approach, and how we imagine the future collaboration of the autonomous system and nature and so on. Just the short information about myself. I'm in robotics already more than 10 years, and I work a lot in the different projects. And the last one, it was about the Internet of Things and implementation of the distributed sensor systems for data collection and data management, where you can take the information about the environment and calculate something new to predict the system in the nearest future. And the second direction that I really like, it's the decentralized systems, and especially the blockchain technology that's already exists in the different areas and already solved a lot of the problems, especially with the transparency, with the trust lack spheres, where many participants in the single process supply chain, and you should provide the transparency of the whole chain inside. And we implementing the decentralized technologies for autonomous systems. That's the really interesting sphere for us. And especially our project, please join it. It's open source project. That's a public project with a lot of cases, and the participants, robonomics.network. And one of the direction where we see the most, the biggest impact for such technology, it's citizens observatories. This is the really important thing that should be done for us, for the humanity, because right now we can't imagine how much influence or how much harm we make for nature, and we can't predict many things that will happen. For example, nobody knows, nobody knew that the oil disaster in the Pacific Ocean will lead to the Gulf Stream changes, and it's unpredictable, but it's big climate changing. Right now, as I know, it's more stable, and right now is okay, but something like 2 years, during 2 years, the Gulf Stream changed the depth of the stream, and the heat from the water was less than ever. And here we are promoting the approach where everybody can sense the state of the environment around his house, around his workplace, to equip some sensors and to provide the transparent information about the nature, about the air, about the water, about the temperature, humidity, and so on, to the global information field, to the internet, that everybody can access it and process it. And this is one of the approach that we really can implement it. And there is several initiatives in Europe and in USA and other part of the world, when the citizens just plug the sensors and providing the data from the sensors about the environment state, and it helps to predict some changes and see some bad cases, some disasters, to make it really transparent and try to solve the problem of the pollution and so on. And when everybody can access to this information and everybody can just plug the sensor, it's a really good way to collect a lot of data and make this sphere more transparent than ever. And here's just a short demo. That's the movie, how we see the smart city of the future, where every citizen have their own sensors, and he measured the state of the environment and provide the information about any environmental processes to make this sphere more transparent. And of course, if we making this data public, we can make our environment, our air or water with the highest quality. If we know the state of these parameters, we can provide the really good quality. Or we can, at first, of course, we will start from the searching the source of the pollution or some hidden processes that have influence to the state. But in the end of this way, we will see the pure air and pure water. But the next level of this idea of for implementing of such technologies, distributed technologies that can provide the information about the environmental state, that we can measure the negative externalities for that we are causing to the nature. If we can measure it, we can estimate how much it costs, and we can pay for that. As you can see, right now there is several cases that already exist in this sphere. It's you can pay for the carbon footprint that you are making, that you're producing during your flight, for example. And the global system, of course, it's not so easy, because you are paying for your carbon footprint, and those money should be spent for modernization of some electricity station in Africa, and the global level of the pollution should be on the same level. But right now it's not so easy, but I hope this initiative that's making according the Paris Agreement, this is the last initiative about such market of negative externalities that we are making. And here, of course, mobile systems and robot systems can be the best monitors. The best monitors for the state of the environment. And here on the video that I'm showing, there is the case when we equip the fly robot and measure the state of the environment around the landfill. Because in St. Petersburg, this is one of the famous landfills that you sometimes you can smell it, and it's not a good option. It's really not a good option. But we applied this monitor system to check what's really happened there. And as we can see, there is some really not good state with the lakes that keeping the water, the nature water that's going from the landfill. And maybe if we will know this situation, we can fix it. But right now, there is not a public information, and actually, according the legal aspect, you can't publicly say that something going wrong here. But the smell, this is not a really simple question. The next thing that we made, we equipped the water robot with some similar system to measure the state of the water and launch this marine robot in Volga River. And in Volga River, we found the state of the water. We saw the map of the pollution, because there is like several places where the factories and some companies just dropping down their waste, according, of course, agreement with the governance. But you should monitor how much the level of the pollution. And usually governmental companies, if they are obligated to monitor the state of the water, they're just coming, taking the probes and searching it in the laboratory. But it's not so clear that especially in this point, the pollution has a maximum. And we are promoting to using the water surface marine robots that making the whole field of the pollution state, and you can estimate what is really happening. And if we will develop this idea that autonomous system and mobile robots will help us to estimate the cost of negative externalities, can estimate the size of the pollution. From the other side, we can estimate not only the size of the pollution, but we can estimate the size of the profit from the nature. For example, can you imagine if some forest will be equipped this system that makes measuring of the profit that this forest producing, for example, fresh air, carbon restructuring, or clear water, the place for the animals, berries, I don't know, a lot of things that really good that producing by forest. And right now we can equip this forest by such autonomous system, and it can measure their positive influence on the nature. And in this situation, the forest can sell the service or sell the goods to the humanity, to the people, to make the whole world is better. And if, for example, near this forest happening something, some bad situation with the air or with the soil, the forest can propose, okay, people, just let me buy this land and I will refresh it. It's like the futuristic vision, but it's really interesting thing that actually developing the ideas when the fishes and the plants acting with the real world using autonomous systems. It can be not the separate animal or the separate plant, but the big forest in the whole. And that's what we should see maybe 50 years later. I hope. But let me back from the idea of the separate agent. If we are talking that different separate agents, if they can act in the economical field, just giving the information about what they are doing, about the environmental state and so on. Right now, we have the real case of autonomous system that can earn the money selling their work, and this is the Gakachu robot. This is a project that's about the robot painter that's painting the pictures. It's not actually, it's not like the some pictures, it's hieroglyphs, Japanese hieroglyphs that's produced by artificial intelligence. And this artificial intelligence, he is living at the server space and using this physical actor that's drawing some pictures and selling it to people or other systems, I don't know, earn the money and paying for the rent of the servers. And we can see how we can create the fully autonomous artificial intelligence that can independently exist without any human actions. Of course, you should launch it at first, but maybe in the future tests we will find the way how to launch this system that it will be not legally launch of the system, but some action that lead to launch. I don't know, it's a pretty difficult question how to make the system fully independent from the human actions, from the legal side, but for the real cases that we have the AI that exists on the server that can pay for itself and can earn the money. This is a really interesting situation. And I think this project is just a first step for the long trip to get the real independent systems that will be symbiotically or independently, autonomously exist in our world. But just the one note more. If we are talking about the fully autonomous systems that can interact with the real world in the economical field, we will face with the situation when the economy of human economy will be much more less than the robotic economy or autonomous economy. And it's a really big challenge for the humanity because right now you can see the situation with the trade bots and the trade bot market much more bigger than the human trade market. But if we will give access to autonomous system to the real world, we will see a much more complex situation than just trading bots. And we should think how to prevent some really dangerous cases. It just one more thing to this big picture that it has not only the positive sides, but of course there is like dangerous sides that we should think about. And the way to solve, one of the way to solve it, I found it in the one book of some journalist that's called post-capitalism, where he described this situation with the bigger autonomous market and the small humanity market. And he proposed, let's make all the deals between the humans with like the deal with money. You, for example, we should pay each other for chatting, for communicating, for acting, or something else, and to increase the speed of the money inside human economy. And we already have some advices how to act as a developers, as the researchers, as a scientist in the real world. And it's called ethical AI design, and it's accessible publicly. You can find it on the website. If you Google the ethical AI design edition, you will find it. Please check it. There is so many interesting topics touched there, and it will be really interesting for your attention. Okay, that's the last slide of my talk, and as you can see, there some robot looking at you from the right side. Be careful, but the future will be really amazing. Thanks for your attention. I'm ready to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Alexander. Do we have questions, dear members of the section?
Yes. There is a question that how to avoid the devaluation of the forests that do not have value for humans, because there will be forests that maybe don't have, like, what do you say, like the values for companies or for anything for humans, but are necessary for biodiversity, for example. Have you thought about it?
If we are coming back to the situation when we have some like semi-conscious system that existing in the nature, and having the way to make the deals with the humanity, with the environment, here is not so many ways to solve this question, actually. And I think we should base on the open market. If we are given the open market mechanism accessible for such situations, we will see some stable state for equilibrium state for the global system, because as you can see, the market will find the fair price for any goods on it, and just going further.
Maybe I could amplify Laura's really great question as well, because I think that for me, this is a very important question. And I think it also relates to, really relates to the commercial system. If you take a forest, which is a complex, integrated system between fungi and insects and animals and trees, and you place the system in a market system, won't market demands drive the agenda versus letting the forest just exist? And I don't want to sort of phrase this question as any dismission of the wonderful and really beautiful research that you're doing. I think it's so important. But my fear and my worry in what feels like a very utopic vision of the world where we have sensors, sort of trying to understand the natural systems, is that it places them in the context of a market system. And when a market is driven by currently 7 billion hungry mouths and soon to be 9 billion hungry mouths, will we allow the sensors of the system actually to acknowledge the agency of the forest and the insects and the animals that's their home? Those are my sort of concerns.
Of course, there is a lot of sides of this idea to give the open market mechanism to try to find the equilibrium state. There is a very discussable topic, but look at the CO2 market right now. Do you want to pay for your carbon footprint? Maybe, but of course there is a lot of humans that don't want to do this. And actually you can pay not only for your flight. I know that some bus companies in Europe already integrated this carbon footprint market to their applications. You can pay for the carbon footprint. And it depends from the humanity and what we really want and what the world around we want to see. If we want the green forest near our house, it's a one point. But if we want the high tech with the smooth roads and nothing more, it's another one.
I think
let's see what we'll find. Yes, please.
I think there might be another solution that might please Ken and yourself, Alexandra, is to turn the forest into bonsai, miniaturize nature so we can best and more efficiently utilize it. We save nature and we make a great economic investment.
This is another one approach. Yes, thank you.
Dominic has a question.
Yeah, well, or in addition to that, so I totally agree, Ken, that this is a highly idealized idea and concept, but I think, and as Alexandra just said, it might work in a way that, you know, that you're willing to invest in the greater good, and there might be people like today that invest in more expensive but organic food, or that put more emphasis on things that are produced in a way that is sustainable. And in the end, if we might get to that understanding that, as Alexandra said, that we might need those forests and they are an important part of the ecosystem, then somebody might be willing to pay for it, either individuals or maybe even individuals with a bad conscience, or companies, or, well, as part of some governance frameworks that you say, like, listen, if you want to do A, then you have to compensate by B, for example, investing in the forest or something like that. It surely would need these governance and political, socio-political and socio-economic models, but I think they could be established if and only if we get to the understanding that this makes sense. And yeah, I'm with you that I don't know if society already has reached this higher level of understanding. We can only try working towards that, but yes, I agree.
Thank you.
My question in this is this, I mean, I think this is an admirable goal, as I think everybody agrees. But I mean, I think what the one question that I have is that, being that I'm in Arabia and I'm very close to the subcontinent and places like Western Asia and all that sort of thing, is that, I mean, and Africa, and the thing is this places a huge emphasis on people who have money. And the thing is that how do we deal with, you know, the notion of carbon generation with people who don't have money? You know, and, you know, so say, for example, like, you know, a lot of people, you know, on the subcontinent, you know, who, you know, are and subsist, and people who are living in subsistence situations and such, who are basically can't really can't afford to pay for a carbon tax.
There is a really really interesting case. For example, right now, if we talking about some natural things, for example, forest near our house, and the people shouldn't pay to the forest to make some trees near the house, and they can make it for free by itself. But there is another question: who not actually who have the money, who has the money, but who owns the land. It much more closer to this situation. And here is in the biggest case for right now, number of cases, the land owns by governance, and right now the governance it's a people, really real people with own ideas and so on. But in this case, we should find that the governance should be not only the people, but also some elements of AI or I don't know, maybe some robots and at governance, as Dominique said previously. Any questions more?
I think no, we are okay.
Okay. Colleagues,
thank you, Alexander. We will have anyway discussion after the blog. So if we receive more questions, we will let them be. And so now it's time for our next speaker. Is here Vladimir Belly.
Hello. I would like to tell about what we are doing in these areas. So I'm capable of investments and managing the company. The company develops robotics of different kinds, and including robotics for art, for fashion, and for some other supplementary purposes when it is used in the museums and expositions. First of all, we prepare a kind of base and we make a robot that is launched to the space. It works at the International Space Station, and then it comes back. And thanks to this, we can find the most interesting technologies to develop them further and to create some interesting things and products that can be used by ordinary people or in some specialized area. So for me, I emphasized a few directions. The ones that I'm interested in: to integrate robotics or complex technologies in cinema, or to create art when robotics is a tool of art, when it is a kind of installation, or to help people who are creating art. So that's why we prepared a few cases that one can see. So I guess that everybody knows our video that employ technologies, videos of Björk, and other musicians also use technology in their videos. And we also had such an experience from Maxim Order, who is one of the Linkin Park participants. We integrated live living robots into his video. So this video shows them, and our exoskeletons are also shown in this video. And I would like to tell further about it because when a person puts on such a suit, he can or she can feel everything that is happening around. It can feel a weight, volume, and everything with your own hands and legs. And to see it in the virtual reality, with the help of the virtual reality equipment, it helped to work not only with the artificially created equipment but also with the living robots that look like humans. And this is also one of the directions that proved that independently of the distance, a person can connect to the robot and to put on such a suit and with the help of this, create something that can be called art, because a person uses his own psychological patterns when creates this. Using this kind of suit, one can use his own perception and to create with his own hands such an anthropomorphic robot. When it happens, we create something new, something perfect. When in real time, in some kind of museum or exhibition, there can be a show when a robot creates some piece of art, and first he does it with the help of a human, and afterwards he can do it himself, because there are deep learning programs, and with the help of these he can learn something and create new images, ideas, and something that was not produced in reality. And all this creates a new direction, such as art and science or art and technology, when technologies are closely interwoven with art, and they enable new possibilities. For example, to use unmanned aircraft vehicles. Some use them to create graffiti or to create some pictures on the sand, anything, and it can help us to fix this piece of art when from the height the artist can control what is produced on the sand, and he understands what kind of picture he is creating. So he is the author of the idea, and he creates it. So this kind of technologies and exoskeletons give us the opportunity to try the new direction, new tendency, when a person being on the lockdown can contact any studio that creates sculptures and all this, just staying at home, for example, staying in Moscow or in St. Petersburg, we can create such a sculpture. It can be a manipulating robot or a human-like robot, but any any kind of device that can copy human actions. For example, in the video behind me, you can see that somewhere when this suit is used, for example, to the International Space Station, it can be done for the person to work in the open space, and a human can manage this work from distance, and robot can afterwards copy his actions. And these tactile feelings that were implemented in robotics resulted in many opportunities to integrate it to many spheres, even those that are not connected with robotics, even to fashion. For example, in the video, you can see that we developed our own clothes and integrated space dust from the International Space Station that was collected by our robot. We mixed it with the paint and applied to the clothes. So there is a kind of unique print on these clothes. Afterwards, we were invited to the Fashion Week, to Paris, and also to Moscow, when there is some interesting idea connected with art. It is quite quick and easy to create something that brands spend to create. It is difficult for them to find investments, and afterwards it's quite difficult for them to trade it, to sell it in the market. But here we have a unique story, because people are very interested in the technology. It is a kind of new motivation for them to get the possibility of creating something new and something that is great, that is connected with the technology and robotics, and it puts a little bit different emphasis on what was done previously. For example, artificial intelligence helps to compose music, to compose texts and poetry, and to find some specific paint. And let's take the example of Photoshop, because with a high quality it can cut out the figure of a human and to create the photo without a human. So this is all possible thanks to the artificial intelligence and to the technology, to what we create. Behind me you can see the assembly of robot further that we created. We spent a lot of time for this, and to use these technologies for different application, for example, in some areas that are quite hazardous for a human being. Also, when we use not only for a specific purpose, but also for artistic people, to implement it in their studios and at their work desks, and to enable access to coming up with something new and to something valuable. And I guess that is a giant step to the future, to the virtual reality, where we can either create artistic objects, pieces of art that are further implemented in reality in some kind of installation, in some kind of product that is valuable and can be promoted for everybody to get a piece of what one is interested in.
I think it's time to give the word to Gwenola and Pierre. So, warm welcome.
Hello, Natalia. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So there's people watching you in VKontakte in Russian and people watching you in YouTube in English. So all the audience is there in the broadcast. So you can now talk to the audience.
Thank you. So we'll first present the work and the film on the website Erewhon, and then we'll talk for a while of an ongoing project about the virus, virus and virality, which we call VirusNet. So the film Erewhon on the website is a project that we started 3 years ago. Gwenola, Stéphane Desgoutin, and I, and which I understand was put on a show this morning.
Yes, the film was screened just before this section.
Okay. What is Erewhon? Erewhon is nowhere backwards. Okay, you just have to swap the W and the H, and you get Erewhon. So it is a place that exists nowhere in particular. In fact, it is a place that only exists behind our screens. Okay, and our idea was that in the commercials that are circulating, like on platforms like YouTube, there is a dream of automatization. In real life, we don't have automatization. There's a need for human work, and maybe maybe this human work will never cease to be. And at least as a philosopher, I'm a philosopher, Stéphane and Gwenola are artists. As philosophers and artists, we can't, philosopher who is document our contemporary dreams and document this dream of automatization that we have now. And not only we have it in our heads, so to speak, but we have it in our screens, behind our screen. So that's where the city of Erewhon is. The city of Erewhon is not in the future. It is simply today, nowhere in particular, behind our screen. So the question that we were trying to tackle by this film is, what would life look like according to these commercials? What would life look like in this dream of automatization? And so we imagined a city which would be completely automatized in all the aspects of the life of the inhabitants. And we try to, imagine the life of the inhabitants of the city. What would their childhood be? What would their old... And so we imagined which would become, how would they spend their day? Just in all the aspects of their childhood be, spend their day.
Sorry, entire script. That's it. Hello. So maybe I just come back from the words just said before about the website.
Yes.
And we also try to mix or to connect a book and movies. And the big difficulty was to find some ergonomic solutions, and also to produce the possibility for the spectator to at the same time read the text, the novels, and also another time they could also follow the different chapters about the movies. So if you are on the website is welcome to everyone.com.
You can see it on your own screen. Are you still here?
Yeah.
Are you still here?
Yes. We can hear you. You're fine.
Okay, and you can see the website.
Now I see the link to Zoom, but now you switch to the website.
Okay,
right.
That's it. So I just come back before. So when you are on the website, first you have the first chapters, chapter 1, and on the chapter 1 you can see the first chapter, the movie. So if you can play it and read it, and in the same time you also can read the text. And the text, it's like a little novel with pictures. It's not really the same thing about the movie. It's maybe an extension or explanation. I don't know how to explain it because it's different in all the chapters. But in the third chapter, the text it's more an introduction. So when you read it, after you also can come back to the movie and at the same point, your last point of lecture, you can follow it. And the next chapters are, in fact, it's like a book. It's not like a book, but we try to find a middle between the book and the movie, and it's in between. And the chapter 2, Samuel Butler chapter 2, when I click on it, I have the second chapter and the second text about Samuel Butler, etc., for all the chapters. So it looks like very easy to play to everyone. And curiously, the big difficulties it was to find this simplicity. Because we didn't want big machines with a lot of text and a lot of picture and a lot of movies. We quite do it that we do that before in another project, and we wanted to find the legibility of a book. That's why the text is quite big. And also the simplicity of this kind of clip, because it's a little about it's kind of clip maybe. I don't know if it's.
We intended to have the website looking as with like 2 dimensions. There's one dimension on the top where you have the various chapters, chapter 3, chapters 4, and each chapters is associated with a text, which is like a short story starting from the film. So the film is like one dimension of the project, and the text are like arrows starting from various chapters of the film. The reference to the book is also, of course, related to the fact that Erevan is also a book from a novel from Samuel Butler. So Samuel Butler is a British writer, and he published this book, this novel, Erevan, in 1871. And it is a utopia. The narrator is in New Zealand and walks over, a big range of mountains and discovers this strange city, Erevan, where the inhabitants have strange costumes and strange beliefs. So one of their strange costumes or beliefs, yes, is that for them, what we would consider as a moral fault is for them a disease. So like if you steal from your bank, which Butler considered as a moral fault, you would get cured for that. You would see a special kind of doctor. On the other hand, what we consider as disease would be for them a moral fault. So if you have a cold, or in fact a virus, you would go to court for that, and you might be sentenced to jail, or you might even be sentenced to death, because it's considered as a moral fault. So they have strange costume and beliefs, and another of their strange costume and beliefs is that they consider that machines have an autonomy of their own. That is, that we would tend to consider that machines are for us prostheses. Like, why do we have cars? We have cars because we want to drive, say, to the seaside. So, the car enabled me to go to the seaside far faster than I could with my own legs. Erewhonian believes that machines are not prostheses for the human, but that machines are a kind of species that exist, that have an autonomy, and which use humans in order to reproduce and develop. So, for instance, the idea would be that cars need human in order to reproduce, because it is, if you put two cars in a garage for a whole night, they won't be able to make a little car. The car needs humans in order to reproduce. But so they also need humans in order to select among themselves the best cars. So the idea is that the car looks shiny and nice, and in order for the human to use it, that is, the car looks all shiny because it wants me, so to speak, to use it. It wants me to drive somewhere. The car, it has no reason to go to the beach, so it needs me to drive it. And when I have driven it often enough, the car is used, the car is worth nothing, and I'm going to buy a new car. And when I buy a new car, I'll choose, the best car, the most efficient, the most pretty car, whatever. So I would, bring to life a new generation of cars, which would be better than the last. So in this way, the cars evolve. And for the Erewhonian, it is, so humans are like parasites to machine. Humans are to machine the same just like bacteria in our stomach are to us. We have lots of bacteria in our stomach, and we use them in order to be able to digest. We would not be able to digest without those bacteria. In the same way, machine would not be able to reproduce and evolve without us. So we are like parasites in the life of machine. So the Erewhonian and Butler offer another way to look at automatization. It is like an hypothesis, a change of viewpoint that enable to consider the full implication of this dream of automatization.
That's, I think, the chapter 3 is maybe the illustration of that you said, because you can see, you saw on the chapter 3 the vacuum cats, the cats on vacuums, how we try to maybe to deal with this idea, and also to have with a little humor, try to explain how the machines can be also a kind of pleasure in the same time for cats, but the cat is the allegory of human in this video. So we used to follow this idea with humors. I'm sorry, my accent is not so good. And also in this chapter about cat and vacuums, we imagine by speculation what it could be if the cats and the vacuums try to develop and kind of intelligence or kind of collaborations between them. So with the humans outside of them, I don't know. So it's a speculations chapters. Maybe also we can speak about the eyes, the chapter 4, with about surveillance on it's not especially caring camera, but it's camera of bienveillance. How do you translate bienveillance? Camera who cares.
So you can't really translate bienveillance. It's an invented word.
So well, yes. One thing first is that all the videos, all the chapters were made by found footage. That is, they're all made from videos that we picked on the internet, and that's considering that everyone exists behind our screen. We didn't shoot one sequence. We simply took pictures from the internet. So Gwenola is now showing you one of the sources of the film, and of course we've worked a lot on these movies. As you can see, maybe the movie that the small video that we took is not sometimes is very different from the video that we use. That is, we have changed the colors, we have refocused
in the chapter 1 we try to put up the people on the
screen. For instance, in the chapter 1 we used footage especially from the Amazon depots. But so you have machine working by themselves, but you also have human. And as we wanted to show that there was a complete automatization, we had to delete all the humans on the screen. So it was really, at the same time, it was made from found footage, but there was really a lot of work on the images, on the sequences. And so for one thing, this work on the images, it had several aims. One of them is that we wanted the film to have a unity. And if you take, various sequences on YouTube, you can see that the colors, they don't match. So if we wanted to, put them in the same universe, we had, in a way, to balance again the colors, so they seem to belong to the same universe. Sometimes we also refocus the image, in particular when you have commercials for a technological device. Usually the focus is on the device itself, and you can only see the human in the background. And the human playing with its new telephone looks terribly happy. And we wanted to put the focus on the absurdity of this happiness, and so we had to recenter the image on the human rather than on the device. So it was made from found footage, but really with a lot of work on the images themselves. Now the chapter 4, I think, the eyes, is it's a good example, I think, of what we wanted to do. It's chapters dealing with surveillance, and so all the images are taken from machines filming things. So it can be automated car filming the road, or cameras, in the cities, surveillance camera. And so of course it can be, it is very easy from that aspect, and it's almost, it's difficult to resist the temptation to make a dystopia of these images. But precisely we wanted these images to have this kind of happiness that you can see in the commercials for technological devices. So our idea was that the Erewhonian always wanted to be filmed, either by cars or by surveillance camera. So that brings us to our new project about Virusland. And maybe we can show the episode on drones, which is related to the
just before that, I wanted to just do a kind of flashback, about Erevan. It's about the universe of machines and robots that we shown on Erevan. It's since Erevan, before Erevan, a few movies with Stefan about the utopias and also the nightmares about the automatizations of the society, and especially with the relation in the call centers and the data centers, when the humans try to be more robotic than the robotics. Well, it tried to imitate the robot, and the robot tried to imitate the humans. And when you have this confusion between human and machines, and there's a project, whose name is War Brain, where Pierre is also interviewed in these movies. And I wanted just to show you a little part, because in these movies you have this kind of dialogue between machines and humans, and I think it's quite more clear about Erevan after that. It's okay, Natalia? It's okay, can you see the website?
Yes, I can see the website perfectly, yeah.
Okay, so I try to tell you 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
About this movie.
Du processus de livraison ne nécessite quasiment aucune intervention humaine.
You might want to open full screen.
Yeah. So beginning just in few seconds after. So in this movie you have a documentary about internet. So the beginning is a documentary about internet, and after you have speculations and reflections about this growing of internet and the connections between human and machines, and between humans with the network. And at the during the movies, the documentary disappeared progressively to let a fiction with researchers who are in the forest, and we try to invent new kinds of connections. So you have a fiction and a documentary in it, and this except it's just the moment just before the fiction. I try to have a better sound. So this is an old work, so it can be, I think, very close from the chapter The Eye of Erevan. And I think I wanted to show you because there are also this relation between this human. In fact, this is a story of a journalist who tried to to capture this woman who could say I'm not a robot, but she doesn't want, or maybe she couldn't say I'm not a robot because she doesn't have the possibility to say that. And we try.
And is this dialogue, is it also found footage? This is probably one of the catchiest plays from the world brain. So where does this come from, this dialogue?
This dialogue is come from an inquiry. It was a journalist from the Times magazine in England who tried to trap call center system, and a call center, maybe an employee from a call center, and this journalist just put the sound on the website, and after we wrote to her to use it on our movie. So we didn't say it for everyone, but all the time, most of our time is to find these movies, and also to write to the authors when we find it, but sometimes it's impossible to find them. The most of the movies from everyone come from advertisements for industry of machines. So it doesn't. This advertisements is not made for the people. It's just for few people who would buy this kind of machines. So it's quite difficult to have all the authorization for this kind of movie, especially for the publicity. But it's a big work. Is to quote them, to put the most of possibilities for the other researchers or the other spectators to find the quote. That's why we put all the links about the quotes, and we try to conserve to find the same system of quotation from the book than from the movies. And as it's not so popular to quote in a movie, it's also a big problematic for us.
So maybe now we'll say if we still have a few minutes.
Yeah, we do have a few minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We'll say a few words about our new project, which is called Virusland. So we started this project during the lockdown in France last spring, and what we were interested in was the various technologies involved in making possible the lockdown. That is automatization, of course, because there can only be a lockdown if at least some of the work that humans used to do can be done by machines, but also the technologies of surveillance. And in France, there was various technology used to make sure that people stayed at home, not only in France but in the whole world. And these technologies were advertised a lot in not only on ads like on YouTube, but also in the news on TV. You had lots of news about drones and drones catching people on the beach, and also the technology of the internet that somehow we believe lead to a new relation to truth, where a message, where what is important in a message is not that it is true, even it is that it is viral, that it circulates on the networks of communication. So in a way, maybe we can show one piece.
Yeah, go ahead.
So sometimes we translate in real time because the first chapter is in French, But we will do it in the same in English, I should say.
Yeah, or you can say afterwards.
Okay.
L'Islande est en guerre contre un ennemi invisible. Nous nous battons avec des nuages.
Qui parlano i medici di questo reparto e tutti gli infermieri e operatori sanitari. Sappiamo che è molto difficile questo momento, per voi e per tutti. Non so chi riesce a sentire. Volevamo dirvi che intanto in tutta Italia stanno pensando a voi e stanno sperando che questa battaglia che non futura la vinciamo.
L'islande, c'est une nouvelle forme de vie. Elle s'étend sur la planète par contagion. Contagion d'un pays à l'autre. Contagion de la fiction à la réalité. L'islande est en guerre contre un ennemi invisible. Nous avons tous peur de l'inconnu, de l'étrange, de nos fantasmes. De quoi exactement?
And so there was a lot of talk, not only in France, but about the virus being an invisible enemy, and the idea that the human race, so to speak, was at war against an invisible enemy. So we were really in this video. We're really interested in the relationship between this idea of war and this, not really this invisibility of the virus and the apparent immateriality of the weapon used in this war. And so we took a lot of footage from Chinese news where streets were cleaned, sterilized, so to speak, by, in a way, clouds. So it was this idea of a cloud war, so to speak. We did another video. This one is in English, about sneezing and coughing, of course.
That's okay. We are on tele conference. We can sneeze in on you.
Yeah, no, we can all cough and sneeze. Before Satomi was, we were all touching the camera, now we can all cough and sneeze.
A person coughs once. These are microdroplets. They're very small and light. Small particles that seem to float through the air. Floating through the air. These particles are all smaller than 10 micrometers. They're very small and light, or 1/100th of a millimeter in diameter. The droplets between these two stay where they are. They don't drift away.
So this that all the chapters are also on the. This is the last one. No, this one. Oops, yes. You can stop share.
Oh, you're showing me everywhere.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, here we are again.
Well, thank you very much for this very cinematic talk. You're actually, your wallpaper makes us believe that you're real, you're not robots, because I know that I look half like a robot. And Ken, you see, he is wearing this mirror mask in order to look, I don't know, I don't even know what he looks like. So I wanted to pronounce the metaphor that I quote from your talk, just to maybe confirm it with you and open up the discussion. So if we take this metaphor from Yerevan, where the disease is a moral fault, and if we think of the lockdown as a situation of punishment, as a situation of prison, as all of us being imprisoned because of the possibility, because of the existence of the automation system. So is the virus something that caused this metaphor from Yerevan to become the material reality? Is that what is this sort of what you are aiming at in the virology project, or extending the metaphor?
In a way, when Yerevan was not exactly a future, but was
the parallel reality, the reality behind the screen.
Parallel reality, which was happy. You know, people in Yerevan were happy. And it,
like the blissful ones, right? The happy
yes,
with
exactly, exactly. Like the people you see on the commercial. If you look at the commercial for a new computer or a new phone, you know, people are behind their screen. They look so happy. We wanted people, you know, we wanted to imagine that automatization would make us that happy and in a way
automatically happy.
Yeah, exactly. In something that is absurd. Okay. So in Virusland, people are not happy. People are scared.
At war.
It is war, and people are scared. So in a way, it is the dark side of Erevan. You understand? Yeah. The dark side of Erevan. Also, there are.
So since Yerevan is like imagined world, is a possible world, one of the possible worlds, so the mirror of this possible world can be unhappy state of the same condition.
It's an unhappy everyone. It's also and one thing we're interested in Virusland is the broad idea of virality. That is not only the biological virus, you know, that's spreading, but also the idea that of, you know, the informational virus, messages that circulate, that spread, and to us, this idea of a lockdown is cannot be detached from the idea of informational virality.
Maybe the lockdown could be a virus in the virus information.
It's
because
like
there are some world in Virusland who become some virus, like by instance, Noir. Against virus. This sentence from our influence, this sentence can a virus.
Yes, exactly. Everyone repeated, "We're at war. We're at war," and it's like, and this kind of informational virus, it has like effect. It makes us, you know, scared. It makes us have certain gestures. In a way, these informational virus, they even have biological effect. You know, it's well known that if you're anxious, you have your immune system is less
prone to virus.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a cycle.
So Virusland is really is not only is a dark side from Erevan, that is, people are not happy, they are scared, but we also want to study this idea, you know, this two-level idea of virality, biological virality, but also informational virality, and how the two of them relate. And so we also, but this video is in French, but we also did a video about what people said on the website about each other. Like in France, but I think the most important thing was in New Zealand. The people in New Zealand during their lockdown had a website where they could denounce, you know, people who were not following the rules. Your neighbor was going out too often, you could write on the website to tell, to give him up to the police. And so, you know, on the web,
again, the virus is a moral deficiency. Like once you could say,
exactly. On the web, you had forums where people would say, you know, like, my neighbor, he goes to the supermarket just to buy clothes. You know, that was illegal. And so we used, like, you know, there was one very funny about, you know, a woman saying, when I eat an orange, I wash my hand, I peel the orange, and then I wash my hands again. You know, these ideas that were circulating. And so it's not so much, you know, there's a part about automatization and technology, but there's also a part about how things circulate. You know, virus, biological virus, but also informational virus, words.
Yeah. And also the climax of this fear, and also the climax of this kind of madness sometimes, was completely global from Europe, from France. It's like the entire world become with this kind of madness. So that's, I think for me, it's unique. I never see that before, and I never read it on my manual of history before. So I was completely astonished about that, and Pierre too. And we were in this lockdown in a village of France, completely outside of the world, and we saw this madness. Not the virus is real, but the madness of the comportment, the madness of the way of life, the madness of the fear when you are in a village and you have nothing, no problem, no illness at all, and the sky is always blue, and there are those people who are completely crazy about fear. It's really, really, really something.
Yeah, there is always this contradiction when you look at the shining sun and when you read the internet, and then there are these two contradicting realities. And yet we know that all the globe is in a very similar situation. That's why we call the festival All in One, because we are all in this. I'm really sorry to cut our conversation, but this seems to be the end of our time. So that was enormous.
Thank you very much for your invitation. It was a pleasure to be here and present our work.
Thank you. It was wonderful to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Frederik de Wilde. I'm an artist from Belgium, and Alia, my apologies, Alia, asked me to talk a little bit about telepresence and the things that touches us and make our sensations change. So, because I have a little bit of lack of time to explore new territories, I will talk a little bit about work which I did in the past, quite some time ago, which is called EOD. And EOD stands for electric organ discharge. So basically it's an electric organ, which is called the organ of Zach or Hunter. But Zach is for the weakly living electric fish, like the Apteronotis albifrons, the Gnatomenus petersi, and so on and so on. And then you have, of course, the organ of Hunter, which is particularly for the electric eel, the Electrophorus electricus, and the Malapparatus electricus, which actually lives in the Nile. So it's a little bit more about, electricity as something which is omnipresent, but which is not only a carrier of a force, but it's also a signal, and a signal means communication. So we can communicate via electricity over distance, which is a kind of, can be part or be considered as some kind of telepresence. And so I think these electric fish are extremely interesting for that. So basically you have two types of electric fish. You have a wave type and a pulse type. So a wave type is it's more like a signal which is omnipresent, so it's all around the body of the fish, almost like a cloud, which is encapsulating the fish. And this cloud is kind of undulating, and it's always there. So we can render actually this cloud of electricity into sound, and that's actually also one of the things I've done or I did. And so for the wave type, it is a sound like a sawtooth wave. And then you have the pulse type, which is more like a Marconi Morse code, which is quite funny. So, and that's quite interesting if you translate that to, human speech, for instance, to human language and characters. So I think these experiments were also quite funny. But basically, these fish are pretty blind, I would say, because they live most of them in murky waters, whether it's in Brazil, in the Amazon, or in Ghana and, in Africa. And so through evolution, they developed this kind of sixth sense. So a sense we don't have anymore, or maybe we had, or we never had, to sense with electricity. So electrosensing. So this allows them to see in dark places, and I find this quite interesting. So their bodies is captured with electroreceptors, the whole body, by the way, and that transfers that signal to the brain, sends it to the brain, and then these electric fishes have huge brains. I think they're really smart animals, one of the smartest fish actually around, because their neurological network is so advanced to interpret these signals and transform them into visual imaginary, mental images, let's say it like that. So they can capture prey with that, they can see the environment, but also they can communicate with it. So they communicate with electricity as well. And it's obvious when they start to mate, so we call this a courtship. So in these courtship periods, two males, for instance, will have a fight with electricity. So they will communicate and jam each other's signal with electricity. So this is called a JAR, jamming avoidance response. And so males will always get in combat and try to adapt their signal depending on the signal of the other fish. So this is quite interesting, because if there is a dominant male that can actually hack into the frequency of the other fish, which always have to change and adapt its signal, not to be able to see and to be able to communicate, that's very exhausting. So the more dominant male will actually win, and the other will probably starve. So all these kind of things it's very, very cool. I think it's it's still very enigmatic, or still very unexplored, how these fish actually form a kind of mental image of something which is out there, which they cannot touch, but they can, through the medium of the water and electricity, they can create a kind of image of it. So I find this really interesting. There is a field in robotics which is particularly interested in this phenomenon. It has to do with robotics, which is exploring places where light is actually seen as something negative, or could have a negative impact. By that I mean deep sea. So for deep sea fish and robotics that are actually exploring the ocean floor, I think it's very interesting, these types of sensorial apparatus. So yeah, electricity is an incredible power, and it's part of our sensorial kind of apparatus, which we don't have anymore. But I think it's from a speculative point of view, I think it's very interesting to explore these kind of things. So where was I here? Okay, let's go back here. Okay, so I start here again. Sensory transduction, the elaboration of nervous information, sensory reflexes and reactions of various complexity, the programming and execution of movements and of language production are all based to a large extent on a crowd of minute electric signals, which continuous flow along the nerve fibers of our brain circuits and the peripheral structures of nervous system, like an incessant electric storm. There are many other live electricity associations that come to mind, and there are more tenuous, but they are there, mostly fictional or anecdotal. When they clone an animal, they first take an egg cell and remove the original genes and substitute the DNA from the animal they want to clone. They then have to zap the cell with electricity, which starts the first division. So Michelangelo, depicting the creation of Adam, had God given Adam the spark of life. And in Frankenstein, the monster is brought to life with a spark from captured lightning. So our own nervous system uses an electrochemical signaling system like an incessant electric storm. So living electric fish are capable of generating low voltage discharges at all times and also produce a weak electromagnetic dipole field around their bodies as a means for navigation, protection, and communication. So the organ which aids in producing the fields and electric discharges may be found as batteries, or you can compare them as batteries, and they're found in the tail. So for the pulse type, so the pulses are propagated at 300 beats, let's say it like that, per second, through the water surrounding the fish, so which establishes a weak electric field between the positive and the negative poles, found at the head and the tail respectively. It has also been discovered that the fish seemingly obey a master frequency allocation agenda, where each species is assigned to a different frequency band and each individual emits frequencies found within the respective band. So if two fish of similar frequencies should happen to meet, one will shift its frequency and act knowing as jamming avoidance response. However, if there exists a large amount of species in a particular river, it may interfere with the agenda, in which case a new form of frequency control may be derived. So scientists are still studying how these communication systems work. So the electric organ contains electrically excitable cells called electrocytes, which you can kind of imagine as a chain of batteries. Okay, at the moment of firing, the electrocytes are asymmetrically polarized, acting as a serially connected batteries, like a car battery. The simultaneous firing of electrocytes result in electric organ discharges, or EODs, which are emitted to the surrounding water. These fish emit a continuous electric current from their tails and have receptors along the body that receives the current back. So this current bounces off to the surrounded objects, and the changed impulse is processed by their brains to give them a clear picture of the surrounding. So each type of these electric fish has its own frequency, and the same type of fish communicate with each other over this frequency domain. You could say that every time they discharge or zap, they sense and digitize the environment, and I think that's quite interesting, and I think that connects also with the topic of telepresence and of our sensorial apparatus and how touching can happen by something which is very ephemeral, like electricity. Voila, I hope it was interesting, and if there are questions, you can always contact me. So have a great conference, and bye-bye.